It's Mother's Day. I'm hoping everybody is celebrating with their mothers. That's what I'm hoping, which would be totally cool. In fact, ironically, we actually have more mothers here than usual, which is fantastic. That we have more mothers on Mother's Day is a great thing. We are going to be in John 18 and 19 tonight. So if you have your Bibles and you want to get there, we'll be in John 18, starting in verse 28. We are about 5 weeks away from closing out our study in the Gospel of John. So it's been a long time, like 40 some weeks so far. We're going to hit just shy of a year, which makes sense. It's a little shorter than Genesis, shouldn't take us quite a year and a half. But we are almost done, and I have really enjoyed the book of John. I don't know if you guys have enjoyed it as much as I have, but to see John really craft the story of Christ, the truth of the gospel, in a way that shows Jesus's deity in such a powerful way that leaves us without excuse that Jesus was God and he was here to save us from our sins is such an awesome thing to go through that truth. So we are really coming to the close now of Jesus's life on earth. And it's going to get pretty heavy for the next couple of weeks. We're going to have 3 good hard weeks of, there's not going to be a lot of light-heartedness in the passages. It's going to be ominous. All right. So you can settle into that, but it's okay. All right. I'm going to mention it probably a couple of times. Actually, I might not mention it maybe just one more time, because for the next 2 weeks, I probably won't be teaching because we're going to have a baby this coming week, which is really cool. So I will not be teaching next Sunday and probably the following Sunday, which is because we're having a child. So it's great. And thanks. I'm glad you're all excited about that. So you guys are lame. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. It's cool. Becca's finally not going to be pregnant now. She's going to have a baby. It's going to be great. So I will not be teaching. So we're going to hand that off to one of the other elders. They can spend some time crafting the story of the Gospel of John with the dark times here. But The Passion of the Christ, the movie, it was produced by Mel Gibson, and it was chronicling the time of Jesus' trial and crucifixion. And it was it's not like one of those movies that you watch when you're really like, I need to feel good, right? It's not like when you watch a movie to feel good, you watch a comedy. You don't put The Passion of the Christ on. That's really the tone and understanding of these next several weeks. So settle into that. But the reality of the scripture is that every time we settle into that understanding, we must always remember that the end of the story is actually coming, right? So as we talk about tonight's going to be dark. It's going to be dark. It's going to be kind of ominous. But the end of the story hasn't happened yet. So the next 3 weeks, remember, the end of the story hasn't happened yet. Now, what's the end of the story? We already know the end, how this story ends. Jesus dies, right? And then what's he do? What's the big thing he does after that? Rise again. He resurrects, right? And that's the end of the story. And there's nothing ominous or dark about resurrection, right? It's not like Frankenstein, right? It's not a scary monster coming back to life, like reanimating dead tissue. This is holy, new, complete life in Christ coming back from the dead because he did not deserve death, and he conquered death and sin. So there's nothing dark about that. We always come back to the end of the story because we're in the middle of the end. It's kind of hard in the middle of the end. All right. It's kind of like life right now. We're in the Christ has come, right? We're in the here and now, but we live in light of the not yet. He has saved us from our sins, and his return and kingdom reign has not yet happened, right? We don't live in heaven. Right? We do not live in the full presence of God completely. We will. That's the truth and reality, that Christ has won, but we live here now in the in-between, right? It's just like that. You got to remember the end, because the end is actually coming, and it is real, and it is reality. So we're in the middle of the end. It's going to be kind of dark. So now that I've prepared that enough, I don't think I can possibly prepare it anymore. We're going to pick up the reading in John 18:28. And as this is a story, usually we do read the whole passage in context. We're not. We're going to read it in the sections that we're going to teach it in, all right? So we're going to be in John 18:28. We're just going to read a few verses and get our bearings as we go through tonight. So the title tonight, I've been trying to tell it, is Jesus, Pilate, and Popular Opinion. And we're going to start with our first point here. It's actually, this is where the holy men talk to the Roman emperor. So John 18, starting in verse 28, goes something like this. They led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning. They themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. So Pilate went outside to them and said, "What accusations do you bring against this man?" They answered him, if this man were not doing evil, we would not have delivered him over to you." And Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." But the Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken, to show by what kind of death he was going to die. So let's get our bearings. Last week we talked about what would have been the Jewish trial. Jesus went before one main guy last week in the Gospel of John. What was his name? Annas. Now, was Annas the official high priest at the time? No, he had been the high priest previously. Now, usually, remember, in Jewish customs, the high priest's term was how long? Forever, a lifetime. It was until that man died he was high priest. But Rome didn't like that. That was too much power for too long for one man. So they said, you can have a high priest, but you got to break it up. You got to have terms. All right. Now, Annas was the high priest at the time when they decided to put these terms in. So theoretically, in the Jewish mindset, you could have seen Annas as still high priest in the Jewish mind, because their term was for life. Now, in Romans' eyes, Caiaphas was the high priest. He would have been a son-in-law to Annas. All right. But really, in the Jewish eyes, it was highly likely that they saw Annas with having the power of the high priest, because he had not died. It was Romans' idea to have these seated high priests. So I went to Annas first, and Annas did some questioning, right? And this is also at the same time where we understand Peter is denying Christ, right? For 3 times he denies Christ, just as Jesus had said. And then once Annas gets done with Jesus, right? He sends him to Caiaphas. And Caiaphas does what would be the official pronouncing, right? Since he's the official high priest in Rome's eyes. And that's where we pick up the story. And the story takes place at what time of day do we see this in verse 28, in the first verse here? What time of day is it now? Now, what kind of morning? That's a different morning, all right? Because there's morning, right? There's morning like starting at 10 a.m., and that's just like morning, right? But then there's early morning. And I know some of you know what early morning is, right? It's the time of the morning that you know it's early because you do not want to be awake, right? It's the time of the morning where you feel no one should actually be awake. It's a godless hour, early morning. Now, it's not. There's no godless hour in the day. But it is early, and it's tough. Jesus has been going all night, right? His night began with what meal? Dinner, right? But it's a very special dinner, right? The Jewish celebrated it, called Passover. It was the Last Supper with his disciples, and it was Passover feast. And it started then, and he's teaching for hours, and they're talking, and they're eating, and they're teaching, and then they're walking, right? And then they're in a garden. Jesus is praying, and the disciples are praying and sleeping, right? And this night is not ended yet, because it picks up right in the garden when Jesus is arrested. This night is not ended for the disciples that followed after, which would have been what we believe John and Peter would have followed after Jesus to Caiaphas' house. This night is not over, right? And Jesus is still going, and now they're taking Jesus. Now it's early morning, and they're going to take Jesus to Pilate. A couple of things you have to understand. I talked briefly last week about the Jewish trial being a bit of a sham, right? Kind of like not really a real trial. We talked a long time ago about the Sanhedrin. Do you remember these guys? The really fancy Jewish leaders, right? They would have been comprising much of this idea of council or elders. When you hear those terms talking about the Jewish leaders, that would have been the Sanhedrin. Do you remember how many we said there was? How many members were part of the official Sanhedrin? Do you remember? No, not even close. It's good. I'm glad for the guess, though. More. What's the number of What's the number of perfection? And then add a 0. But then you could have a tie, so you need one more. There you go. 71. That wasn't it. So why wouldn't they do 73? I don't know. Or why not 77? You can't have a tie at 77. 71. 71. It's how many members in the official group. Now, each town could have a lesser Sanhedrin. It could have been, if you had a large town, you could have 73 ruling men to make up a council to lead and delegate. You could have a lesser Sanhedrin of about 23 members. That was a minimum, right? It also would have been understood to be what would have been a quorum, right? Now, you know what a quorum is? I have to explain this. It's enough to have a vote or enough to make a decision, right? Now, if you were having 71 members, like, they saw that you needed all the members of Sanhedrin for something like declaring an act of war on another nation. You need all of them there. Not just a quorum. You need all 71 members, and everybody's got to vote, right? But if you had something lesser, you could get away with the quorum, 23. You didn't need everybody, right? Just 23. Now, when you're holding a trial in the middle of the night, which is not when they meet, mind you, right? In fact, in the Talmud, it was said that no member of the Sanhedrin should ever make a decision during hours of darkness. So many interesting things in the Talmud. Now, if you don't know what the Talmud is, you got to use another word. The Talmud would have been a collection of gatherings of teachings beyond simply Moses' teachings, beyond simply the Old Testament's teachings. In addition, it would have had rabbinical teachings as well that were seen as appropriate to hold. It's called the Talmud. Today, if you met a practicing Jew, they would understand what the Talmud said. It's their rule book, right? It's their go-to rule book. You want a manual on being a Jew, go to the Talmud. All right, Talmud, if you want to Google it. All right. I mean, it's not really good reading, but you could Google it. And in the Talmud, it said many things. They shouldn't make any decisions during dark hours. In fact, in capital cases, right, we're talking about they want Jesus dead, right? That's a capital offense. They want to kill him. They actually were to listen to testimony, of people individually, and then they were supposed to at least take a minimum of a day to go home separately, all to their own homes, deliberate over it, come back, hear the testimony again, and then weigh in. Because at that point, they should have processed and thought critically about what was hearing. None of this happened. This is not how this trial went at all. This is in the middle of the night, right? Likely with a quorum. They waited till the morning because that would have been the first chance they could have had to have a full quorum. And as soon as they could have had a quorum, because again, the Sanhedrin is going to meet in the beginning of the day. They're going to weigh in on things, much like a Supreme Court. They begin meeting in the middle of the day and they carry on. I can tell you absolutely, all right? Some of the I'm trying to find it. It doesn't actually say it in John. In other passages, it'll say something like the full council. This was not the full council. It would have been understand that it was a quorum. It would have been enough to get Jesus sentenced. All right. But it was not the full council because remember Nicodemus? Remember him? Thought about him a while ago? Right? He came to Jesus. He had some questions for Jesus. See, Nicodemus would have actually been one of those secret followers of Christ. He actually understood what Christ meant. He believed in who Christ was. We know that. We know he used terms for reverence for Christ when he came to him. Rabbi, he understood that he was a teacher. Now, this is a leader of the Jews, the Sanhedrin, the elite of the elite, calling Jesus a rabbi. It would have been a huge deferment of respect. He understood the authority that Jesus had. You had a guy like Joseph of Arimathea. Now, what do we know about Joseph of Arimathea? Right, he took Jesus' body. He actually let his grave be used for Christ. I like to think that Joseph believed so much that he understood what Jesus said about him rising again, and he knew he would get his grave back. He's only borrowing it for a couple of days, guys. It's not really a big sacrifice. He's going to be gone soon, right? I like to think that, but we don't know that. But he actually took Jesus' body, right, after he's dead, and he puts him in his grave. He gives up his grave. It would have been a big sacrifice, right, because you put money and investment into this grave site that was going to be your final resting place, right, where your family could come and remember it. And that's what that was going to be, and he gave it up. He gave it up so that Jesus could be in it. And he was a member of the Sanhedrin. These men would not have been, right, supporting his murder. They would have been against it. This was not a full council of the Sanhedrin. This was not all 71 members weighing in, everybody giving a yes or no. It also, if you read the other gospel accounts, it sounds more like a town hall meeting, right? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. That's kind of how it went. Now, if they were to give a sentencing, it would have been each one individually, ironically, would have started with the youngest of the members of the Sanhedrin and gone to the oldest, so that the older members and their vote did not sway the younger members from following their conscience in voting. Very interesting, right? Again, a lot of deferment was given to the elder people in that room, right? The oldest Sanhedrin members would have been those carrying the most authority. So they would let the youngest go first, individually giving their votes. Everyone cast their vote. This was more like, what more do we need to hear, right? Everything's right? Let's rile up, right? Let's kill him. That's how this whole process went. It was a mockery of what they had ever established as trial, because the goal was Jesus's death. That was the goal. It was already weighed and decided and measured, and that was where they were going to end up. That's what you have to remember. And so from there, he's taken to Pilate. It's another walk in the early morning. Jesus has done a lot of walking. And he goes to Pilate's house. They take him before Pilate's house, and they're waking up Pilate. It's interesting. They don't want to be defiled, right? So the Jewish custom was this. It was not just that the Passover meal was the end of the celebration. It's highly likely that the Passover meal was simply the beginning of the celebration. It would have been a week-long celebration. Remember, the Jews knew how to party. It was just a reality. They knew how to have a good feast. And it wasn't just a day of celebration. It was a week or 2 weeks or longer. We were going to celebrate and remember what we were doing. It was very much an idea of remembering what was going on. They didn't want to defile themselves, all right? Because during this feast week, they wouldn't be allowed to go into the home of a Gentile where they had a roof. I know, it's weird. If it had a roof, they couldn't do it. They would become defiled, unclean. They'd have to actually ceremonially cleanse themselves again before they could even participate in anything that was going on with the celebration of the Passover feast. So where did they go? They went into like the portico area. It's like the walled place where horses could ride in and whatnot. It was open. There was no roof because they were allowed to go onto a Gentile's property as long as they were in view of the sky, as long as the sky was overhead. So now it's early morning, and they're waking up the Roman governor. We got to picture this because Pilate's coming out, yawning, right, with his coffee in his robe because they can't meet him inside. So he's coming out to them, all right, and he's a little sleepy. He's blinking a lot, like, what's going on? All right, that's the scene. You have to understand that's what's happening. It's early morning. Pilate does not want to be awake doing this right now. And that's kind of how you have to see this going on, right? Pilate went outside to them and said, what accusations do you bring against this man? Basically, all right, what's going on? What's up with this guy? He doesn't understand. I don't think he understands right now how serious this is. He's about to. All right, this is what I want you to see. They answered him, if this man were not doing evil, we have delivered him over to you, right? Like, look, obviously he's done something very bad, or else he wouldn't be here waking you up, governor, right? With your slippers and your bathrobe. We wouldn't do that if it, which is other words is it's early. Do what you need to do. I'm going back to bed, right? That's kind of the translation. You can hear it there. And then it gets serious. This is when I think Pilate really starts to snap into it. Just said to him, it is not lawful for us to put anyone to death. I was like, I'm sorry, death? Right? Oh, you want to kill him? Oh, well, that is different. I'm gonna need to put some different clothes on. This is a serious matter. You want to kill him? It's early. This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken to show by what kind of death he was going to die. How did the Jews bring about capital punishment? What did they do? What was their, there we go, stoning. That was their go-to move, right? If you committed a capital offense, your execution was by stoning. Romans kill people. A lot of ways. Good answer. It's a good answer. It's a good answer. What does the Bible say about how Jesus was going to die? He's going to be crucified. He's going to be hung on a tree. And cursed is a man hung on a tree. The Jews did not hang people on a tree. That's what they didn't do. The man that was hung on a tree was the lowest of low. How they wouldn't, that's just not how they rolled, but the Romans did. If that's how Jesus was going to die, you can see very quickly how it's really convenient that capital punishment was not in the hands of the Jews anymore. They couldn't commit capital punishment. If they had committed if they were in charge of capital punishment, if they could carry out the death sentence, Jesus would have been, which would have offended the prophecies about him. Everything's all God's timing. And they're turning him over to the people that can commit capital punishment, and they're going to kill him. Crucifixion. That's what the Bible says. It's crazy how it all works out like that. So we're going to pick up the reading in verse 33 because the story's not done. So these holy men, they got together. They talked to Pilate. So now Pilate and Jesus are going to get together, and they're going to have, the point is, it's on the screen, Jesus and Pilate have a chit. Now, you can't have a chit without a chat. Okay, so they're going to have two. This is just the first one, right? It's spelled with a C. Don't get crazy. Pilate and Jesus have, and it's 30, verse 33 is where to pick it up. This is where Jesus and Pilate are going to interact for the first time, but they're going to do it again later in the passage. So Pilate enters into his headquarters. Basically, he draws inside now. All right. He's getting away, right? He's coming in. He's probably washing his face. He's getting dressed a little bit. And Jesus is called. And so that he comes before him. He says to Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus answered, "Do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me?" Pilate answered him, "Am I a Jew?" Right? Do you hear it? Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done? Like, what could you possibly have done, Jesus? And Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. My kingdom is not from the world." And then Pilate said to him, "So you are a king?" He put two and two together there with the word kingdom. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice." And Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" What is truth? Doesn't that just resonate with like our culture? Everybody's got truth. You got truth. I've got truth. Truth, right? But don't be offensive. Don't step on my truth's toes. Even if your truth seems like it may, you should really just coexist with me. You should accept my truth, really, and I'll accept your truth. And then we can have truth of being conflict of each other, which really means one's a lie. That's just logic. What is truth, Pilate says? You have to hear how this is going, right? They're together, and Jesus' answer, "Are you king of the Jews? Do you say this of your own accord, or did others tell you to say it to me?" Right? Why are you saying that? What do I have to do with you, Pilate? What's the deal here? And Pilate's like, "Whoa, dude, I didn't bring you here. I didn't get my Roman guards coming out there and grabbing you, dragging you in here. Your own people. The chief priests brought you before me. And it's early. And they want you dead. And your defense is, what do I have to, I don't have anything to do with you. You've been brought here by your own people. So are you king? Right? Are you king?" So, "Well, my kingdom isn't of this world," right? He tells Peter he comes quietly. There's been no uprising. There's been no rebellion here. This is Jesus knowing the will of the Father and following his Father's voice, no matter where it takes him. Are you the king? Are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus flips it. It's not just about kingdoms now. It's about truth. Right? I'm the truth, and he who listens to me knows the truth. What is truth? Pilate says. Pilate this whole time is going to be torn as to who Jesus is and whether or not death is what this man needs. Right? That's it's the reality that is living in Pilate's heart. And we're going to see more. There's actually more. We find it in Matthew about this whole situation with Pilate. It's not just extended to Pilate. His wife gets involved. So pick up the reading. This is their first interaction. This is their chit of the chat, because they're going to have a chit chat. After this, Pilate's left thinking, well, I don't know what I think about this Jesus, but I certainly don't think he needs to die. All right. That's really where Pilate's going with this. We pick up the reading, right? And Pilate's going to cave a little bit here, hoping to persuade the overwhelming consensus of the religious leaders, because he's trying to sway them. All right. After he had said this, after he talked with Jesus, picking it up again in the second half of verse 38, he went back outside of the Jews and told them, "I find no guilt in him. He's not guilty. But you have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So, do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" And they cried out again, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now, Barabbas was a robber. Then Pilate took Jesus. Hang on a second. Do I stop there? Yeah, let's talk about Barabbas for a second. You know what Barabbas was? He was a robber. In other passages, there's also going to be some other things he was called. He was an insurrectionist. That's it's a crazy word. What does that mean? Now be taken up on insurrection. What? He led fights against the government. Yeah, he causes problems. He was an insurrectionist. Now, let's see. He would have had the people's vote in some cases, right? There would have been people that were insurrectionists, right? That would have liked to overthrow Rome, right? That was a legit consensus of some of the Jewish people in Jerusalem, and particularly in the outlying lands of Jerusalem. Get rid of this Rome, right? So they would have had insurrectionists, maybe even there. One of the most interesting things to really study, and if you get a chance to study it, I recommend you do, is really who's in this crowd? What is this group of people that's here? We know the chief priests are here, right? And we don't know if it's actually 71, but there's at least 23 guys that have brought this guy over. And probably some of the people that were at his house all night, right? There were people there because Peter was warming us up by the fire. There were other people there accusing him of being a disciple when he's denying Christ, right? There were other people there probably followed. They want to see where this is all going, right? It also, now we know there's a custom, right, that during Passover, the governor exchanges a prisoner by the request of the people. Now, the people have requested Barabbas. Now, who would not have wanted Barabbas out because he was causing problems with the government, and they actually benefited from having the government stay in favor of them? The high priests, right? The chief priest would not have benefited from having Barabbas out. He was an insurrectionist. He was causing tension between the Jews and the Roman rule. Now, the high priest benefited from having freedom of religion and being able to practice their law actually in the temple, and they got great freedom and protection from Rome. They don't want insurrectionists mounting rebellions. They actually want to keep it calm, right? Because they knew they weren't ready to mount a full rebellion. And all this is causing tension, and they experienced freedom that actually other religions did not really get in Rome. They don't really get that kind of freedom, the way the Jews had the freedom to worship God. They would not have been in favor of this. It's interesting when you read the other passages, like in Matthew, and you read this account, the Jewish leaders are actually stirring the crowd. Tell them you want Barabbas. You really want Jesus dead. Don't you want Jesus dead? Jesus is a horrible guy. We should really kill him. They're actually stirring the crowd up. They're swaying popular opinion. They want Jesus dead. They're willing to let Barabbas out, even if it was going to cause them problems, even if it could sacrifice some of the freedoms they have. They figure it's easier just to handle Barabbas, right, than to handle Jesus. A few people follow Barabbas, but really in the face of hardship, they'd stop. But Jesus, he's healed people. He's done miracles and signs, things we can't compete with. There's no way. The things he does, the words he says, the people that are following him, you got to put an end to this, right? Remember Caiaphas' prophecy. Caiaphas thought, right, the high priest, isn't it better for one man to die than for the nation to suffer? Basically saying that if this man is indeed God, right, and he garners too much support, Rome will come in and they will cut us off. We will not be able to worship God anymore. It's better that we just kill him and crush this uprising. Ironically, that didn't work because we sit here today. But if we just kill him and crush this uprising, then we can still live in the freedom that we have to worship God. That was his idea. And so they're stirring up the crowd. Yeah, Barabbas. We want Barabbas. Just get Barabbas out. Jesus is evil. Let's kill Jesus. Kill Jesus. And that's why they're going to yell, crucify him, right? It's coming. Those words. Give us Barabbas. Give us this robber, this murderer, this insurrectionist. Yeah, we'll take him. You can keep Jesus. But they don't just want him to keep Jesus. They don't just want Jesus to be a prisoner, right? They want more. So here he's going to keep, he wants to appease the people. Pick it up in verse 1. Pilate took Jesus and flogged him. All right, now remember, if you've seen the Passion of the Christ, there's a difference. The Passion of the Christ depicts a very harsh flogging. That would have been a flogging after he was sentenced to death. This flogging is probably a light flogging. Like, they just knock him around a bit. It's kind of how this is going to go, all right? Because he hasn't been convicted of anything. He's trying to appease the people. He's trying to calm down the high priests, take the crowd's tone down. Because does he find Jesus guilty? No, there's no guilt here. This man's innocent. So he flogs him. The soldiers twist together a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they array him in purple robe, and they come and say to him, "Hail, King of the Jews." They strike him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to them, "See, I am bringing him out to you that you may know that I find no guilt in him." Now, it's important to note that when he's saying these things, when he's bringing this Jesus out, all right, this is basically like, look at him, right? So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and a purple robe, and Pilate said, "Behold the man." Look, this guy could not possibly be a threat to the kingdom, right? If we can so easily just beat him, we throw a fake robe on him. Look at the crown of thorns. It's obviously just a man. He's not a king. Nothing to worry about here. See, for the Jews, the problem was blasphemy, right? They got a false testimony that they could condemn Jesus on blasphemy, which was an offense punishable by death and stoning. That's what should have happened to Jesus. But they can't kill him. They need an offense that Rome will kill him for. And Jesus, he is the king of the Jews. Well, king, that's a problem word. That's a problem word for the Romans. If he's saying he's king, but Caesar's king, Caesar's the ruler. How can we have two rulers? We can't have two rulers. Only one. Caesar. He's not a king. Look at him. It's a fake robe, guys. It's a crown of thorns. I just had like 600 guys beat up on him for a little while. He's obviously just a man. What's the big deal? Right? He's not guilty. This is the best I got. Let's just make fun of him. And now you guys can calm down and go home. That's Pilate's hope here. He wants to appease the crowd. Is it going to work? No. We know the end of the story. We know how this goes. Popular opinion is going to weigh in again. You pick up the reading in verse 6. When the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him, crucify him." Well, that's a dark turn, right? This conversation's going way down into dark places. Pilate said to him, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." Pilate wants to distance himself right now from this whole situation. He's not liking where this is going. Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law, he ought to die because he has made himself the Son of God." There's the blasphemy problem, right? That's a problem for the Jews. When Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. Let's stop there. He knows now they want him to die. He knows now they want him crucified. Not just killed, crucified. They want Pilate to crucify him. That's what they want to have happen. And it's pretty clear now. I told you that, remember, the religious leaders are riling this crowd up, right? They're spreading the rumors. They want Jesus dead. Barabbas seems like a good idea. Let's crucify Jesus. So now whoever's made it out, right, early to what they thought was just going to be the traditional handing over of a prisoner is now getting riled up to crucify Jesus, right? And we know we live in a day and age when we've seen riots. In fact, we see riots usually at least once a month in some portion of our nation. There's a riot, a big riot. Something happens, a few people get bent out of shape, and then a few more, and then hundreds, and then thousands, and then all of a sudden you got several thousand people that are very unhappy, and they're breaking things and ruining things that in reality are the things that they were actually trying to save. It doesn't make any sense. Riots don't make sense, right? This doesn't make any sense. They weren't really here to crucify Jesus. Not all those people were the religious leaders that had just had like a sham of a trial to kill Christ. That's not what happened. But that's what's happening now. Crucify him, they yell. We want him crucified. And it's that mob mentality where somebody yells something out and then somebody else yells it out. And then now everybody's shouting it. Let's crucify him. Crucify Christ. But struggling with this is Pilate, right? Because very clearly, I find no guilt in him. You want me to crucify him? And Pilate knows full well that is the thing reserved for the worst. It is the horriblest death they can do. Crucifying him. And he's not guilty. How am I going to crucify him when there's no guilt in him? I don't see this man rising up saying he's king over Caesar. In fact, he says his kingdom is somewhere else. Maybe it could be crazy. His kingdom is not of this world. Caesar doesn't have to worry about him. You want me to crucify him? It's deeper than that. It's deeper than that. Matthew 27, something else happened. So Pilate and Jesus are going to have this second chat, right? They had having a chat. Pilate and Jesus are going to finish their chit chat now. So he enters into his headquarters again, right? Remember, we just read, he was even more afraid. He's afraid because now he knows what they want him to do. He knows what they want him to do, but he is not guilty. He can't find any guilt in him. And they want him to crucify him. He enters into his headquarters, and he's really, at this point, he's really pleading with Jesus. He really needs Jesus to give him some information, just something that he can just concretely know and go with. He says, "Where are you from?" The origin of Jesus was something that, had kind of been disputed. This man he says he's from God, right? But he's from Galilee. So where's this man from? But Jesus gave him no answer, and silence. So Pilate said to him, "You will not speak to me. Do you not know I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you?" He's pleading with him. "I hold your fate in my hands, and you're not going to talk to me?" Jesus answers him, verse 11, "You would have no authority over me at all, unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin." And that's how Jesus ends his chit chat with Pilate. So we'll close our teaching for tonight. We'll finish the sentencing next week. Jesus' words are so profound. Right? You don't understand, Pilate. Any authority you have, it's been given to you, and I know who gave it. You don't have any authority. No real authority over me that has not been given to you by my Father, and I follow what my Father says. My Father's got me right here where he wants me, and your authority doesn't come from anything that he doesn't give. And on top of that, he says something else. It's very interesting. I don't want to just gloss over. It's part of exegetical teaching. He says, "Those that handed me over to you have the greater sin." It would have been the religious leaders. Their sin is greater. In some ways, he's saying to Pilate, he's like, "Pilate, you're going to have to do exactly what you have to do, because this is exactly what has to happen. This is what will happen. But those that handed me over to you, they have the greater sin." It's not going to help Pilate sleep, because you see, back in Matthew 27, the same account, you find out that his wife actually comes to him and says, "Have nothing to do with this man, because he is righteous, and I have been troubled in my dreams about this man." Likely, those dreams came from God. And likely, those dreams were meant to have Pilate have a hard time with this, to understand that this man was the innocent Christ. I don't know Pilate's heart. I don't know Pilate's position, right? Do you? Do I? No, I don't cast that final judgment on Pilate. But Pilate struggled because he knew Christ's innocence in this matter. It doesn't say that Pilate had any idea that he was God or that he should be worshipped. That he knew he was innocent. But the authority Pilate has came from God, and that's where Jesus hung his hat. That's where Jesus hung his hat. You see Jesus right now doing some of the most recklessly abandoned things in the history of the world. An innocent man, it's the thing, I don't know men if you particularly feel this way. When I watch a movie, there's a point in many movies, particularly, I've said this before, particularly in movies that involve some sort of hero or even a superhero, there's a point at which, right, think Batman, where the man who's doing the good, right? And he's doing good, but somehow it is spun that man is actually the evil one that should be punished and caught. And it really frustrates me. I have a real problem. I get really frustrated when what is right is actually perceived as what is wrong, and is being held accountable for wrong things that the person that was trying to do right didn't do. In fact, they're trying to do the opposite. It really frustrates me. When I watch movies, it's one of those things that internally I get frustrated by. Even though I always know the movie or the show is going to resolve in the fact that the person doing right is going to be seen as doing right. It's still in that moment I'm frustrated. This is reckless abandon. He is on trial for his life, and he's being asked point blank, "Where did you come from?" And he could simply say something like, "I came from my Father," which he's said before. I come from my Father. This is something he has said many times. Many times. He doesn't give any answer. Nothing. He is silent. And he's silent in the face of a Roman governor. The Roman governor is saying, "I hold your fate in my hands. You're giving me nothing. Just tell me something. And he looks at him. It's just reckless abandon. You don't have authority. You don't have authority that doesn't come from my Father. I am not worried about what you can do. What I am instead worried about is what my Father wants me to do. What if that was how we really believed God? That's the question for tonight. What if that's how we really believed God? What if you truly believed that God had actual authority, that God gave real joy, and that God's joy was exactly what you needed, that his glory was exactly what you lived for? What if that's what we believed? If that's what we believe, we would live as recklessly as Jesus lived. We would live with pure unabandon for Jesus, pure unabandon for the will of the Father. That's how we would live. So then what stops us? What stops us? It's really simple. It's actually really easy. I mean, it stops you and I every day. It stops me. It stops you from living in the reality that Christ is living in right now, faced with death that I can assure you will probably be nothing like any of the deaths that we embrace at the end of our lives. He was beat lightly. Now they're going to beat him horribly, and he is going to be hung on a cross. And the Bible is very clear that you would not have even known, not that he was Jesus, that he was not even a man, that he was like a butcher meat hanging up, right? It's like the Rocky movie where he's beating that meat, and you're like, I don't know exactly what that meat was. You don't know. Was it a cow? Was it a pig? I have no idea. It was, and it's like that. Only he was a man, and he's hanging on a cross, and you can't even tell it. You can't even tell he was a man. He knows that is coming for him. And he gives no defense. And he doesn't give credence to simple man's authority because he is following God. Well, we don't live like that. And the thing that stops us is a simple lie. It's a simple lie. All of our sin flows from the same lie. And that lie is what God has for us is not really that good. It's not really that joyful. It's not really that true. He's not really that glorious. What I have for myself, it's going to be super fun. It's going to make me look real good. And it's probably much better. That's the simple truth that we live. And it's the lie about God. See, if you believe that God, right, had all authority and that he wanted to give you joy, in fact, like the psalm says, that he holds pleasure in his right hand and he wants to give it. He wants to give pleasure. God is not a cosmic killjoy. He's actually the holder of joy that wants to give us pleasure. Did you know that? Did you realize that? How awesome is that? Right? Enjoy everything for the glory of God, but don't misuse anything for the glory of yourself. See, if we really believed that, we would change the way we lived. I would be a much better friend to you. You would be a better employee. Because above all, you would understand who God is. You understand where glory belongs. Jesus believed it. So much so does he believe that God's will is perfect and he will follow it, that he looks at the man who can sentence him to death and says, it's not your authority that matters. It's the one who gave you the authority that matters. And his authority, I will follow to the end. Do you really believe it? Do you believe it like Jesus believes it? More than likely tonight, you should come up with the answer, no. I know most of you. I love you, right? You know me, okay? I know some of you love me. I understand for those of you that don't. But, right, you know that the answer for me is no, I don't always believe that because you've seen me live. There are times when I just get it so wrong, right? You've seen me interact poorly with my wife. You've seen me not be the best dad to my kids. There's things you've seen about me because you've seen me live life, right? And I can probably say the same about you. But since you're not teaching, we don't make examples of you. Lucky you, right? If we don't live that way, and the truth of the matter is it's based on a lie, then tonight as we respond, here's what I would encourage. That we walk to response, right? It's all part of worship. And if we're to open up God's word and hear his truths, we must respond to it. So as you respond tonight, talk to God. Talk to God about what you believe in that lie. What you live out from that lie. What parts you really like about that lie. And at the end of talking to him about it, make sure you communicate to him that it is a lie. Because you have to understand God wants to give you pleasure. And he wants his glory to be what you're about, because if you pursue his glory, it's not going to peter out. It's not going to end. Your joy is not going to find itself buried in a dumpster, because that's where our joy leads. It ends in futility. I can assure you, I've read Ecclesiastes, and nobody had more fun than Solomon, and it all ended in failure, misery, and destruction. If you pursue God and his glory, it ends in kingdom building for eternity. You can literally begin heaven today by worshiping God in the way that Christ worships him, with reckless abandon, knowing that his truth, it may lead us somewhere that physically and emotionally and mentally we don't want to be, but spiritually there could not be a better place for us to communicate God and his glory, to communicate his truth to the people. That may be what happens. It happened to Jesus. We should not expect it to not have us, but we should live in that truth. So respond tonight. Respond to God. Talk about the lies that you believe. Remember the truth and the glory that is his, and hear it in the voice of your Savior. When faced with death, has nothing left to say, but it is God who I live for, and it is his authority that I will follow. And may that be said of us. So spend some time in prayer responding, and rejoice in song together with the worship team when you're done.